All right, we are starting our next chapter, which is titled Living Things and Their Environment. And to start the unit, I had you get with a partner and grab a Chromebook and sign in and go to my website. And when you got to my website, you discovered that there were 5 pictures that were pulled for you and posted. And you were asked to take out a sheet of paper and to take a certain organism's vantage point and list all of the things that were both living and non-living in each picture. So for this first one, you were a deer and you were asked to list all of the living and non-living things. So you listed like rocks or trees or bushes or water or sunlight or oxygen, and so on. You can keep listing more and more of them. And then you went on to the second picture, which you were from a scorpion's vantage point, so listing all of the living and non-living things. And you did the same thing for the third picture, this time being a duck. And then a rabbit for the fourth picture. And finally a clownfish for the last one. And after you had written down all of the different living and non-living things, you were asked to try to classify them into 2 categories. And most of you discovered that an easy way to go through all of the non-living and living things is to just put them into that category of either being non-living or living. And so that is what most of you did, and you discovered that things like soil, or some of you might have listed oxygen, or sunlight, or you could have put down water as just a couple examples of non-living things. Then over here, the living things, a lot of you put down plants. There were other animals that were also in there. So those are just a couple examples that were also in there. So, and you could have kept naming more and more, which you did. But the main thing I wanted you to take away is that organisms get classified starting off as either non-living or living. And these are actually given fancier names that we refer to as being biotic or abiotic. And so we'll talk more about those when we go through our notes in class, but I want you to start getting the idea that there are abiotic and biotic factors that are a part of each habitat. And so after you did that, you had to answer some questions saying something like, why did you classify them this way? And the reason why you classified them that way is because they were easier to work with. It's easier to take the organisms and decide, are they living or are they not living? A lot of you tried to put it into like they are in water or they are on land, and that was fine, but you had a lot of ones that were overlapping that could fit into both, and so it wasn't a real efficient way for looking at the habitat and establishing how to classify them. So that was the first question. The second question asked you if this was an example, each one of these pictures was an example of a population, community, and ecosystem. And that one's a little bit challenging because of the fact that an ecosystem was the best answer. And the reason why it is because an ecosystem by definition contains both the living and non-living parts of a habitat. Okay, and so that one it was an example. Each one of those was an example of an ecosystem. If we were talking about just strictly a population, we would have been looking at just one specific organism, and it's the group of all of that one individual organism in an area. A community is actually a group of organisms that are interacting together. So you might have different organisms, but again, it's different groups of them. But an ecosystem actually ties in the part of the non-living. So when we're talking about populations and communities, we're talking about just living things. When we talk about ecosystems, we're actually looking at the entire habitat, including both the living and the non-living parts. And so the correct answer for that one should have been an ecosystem. And then finally, the last question said, create a real-life example of your own in which you list both the non-living and living parts. And most of you did examples from your house. So you might have a family pet that was listed under the living part, or your parents or guardian or brothers or sisters all would have been under the living part. And then you had things that were not living. And so pretty easy stuff to start with, but we're really concentrating in on understanding the definition of ecosystem, and we're also really focusing in trying to get used to using words like abiotic and biotic, and we'll talk more about those when we go through our notes together. So take a couple minutes, respond to the questions that are below the video, and we'll talk about all of this when I see you in class. Talk to you later.